security or like, personal effects, whatever they may need, solidarity, a lot of mutual aid type work. So these are wonderful events that we have through the community center, where essentially we're trying to build a community that's built for us, by us, so that we can, express our humanist ideals in the world. Our board is entirely volunteer. All of our volunteers in the back, the people who helped set up our breakfast this morning, we can say thank you so much to our breakfast crew this morning. So we have a number of volunteers that assist with not only events, but setting up for the community center. So if there's an event that you see either represented up here on the screen or on a meetup page that you would that is not represented, please let us know. We'd like to see what kind of events you want to see held here at the community center. We have a new Navigators Club that we just started up. That's essentially, what would you call that? Scouts, secular scouts. So it's a wonderful set of programs that we have here at the community center. It's all based on humanist ethics and values. So please join us. Let us know what you want to see, and see if you would like to help volunteer. We always could use people on the breakfast crew. We could always help ask for people who help clean up in the back. So small things here and there, and get to know each other. It's a great time, a lot of fun, and just wanted to say thank you to all the volunteers that and event leaders that we have, and all that you do for the community center. So let's see here. I guess we are ready for our Humanist Minute at this point. I was vamping so that we could get our Humanist Minute presenter up here. Scott Sabatka is one of our board members, and will be presenting on something near and dear to him, and probably near and dear to all of us.
While being slightly out of breath, we just had somebody drop some food off for our pantry. It's a really heavy box. I am so old. Is that close enough? All right. So, hi, my name is Scott Sabatka. I am the co-director of the Service and Participation for the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix, and mildly out of breath right now. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about service and participation, and it's something that's been very important to me. I joined the Humanist Society right after the 2024 election because I knew that people were going to get more hard times. And they did. And I was very pessimistic about it, and I have still been surprised. And so what HSGP provided for me was an opportunity to volunteer and help people, and a venue to be kind that most places don't really offer. And so I've been coming here all the time ever since, and it's just been wonderful to put our values into action and help people in the immediate community and in the larger community as well. I wanted to take a moment to talk about some of the activities that we have that we would love for you to participate in, and then some of our upcoming events as well. God, still. So, and I'm not nervous at all, by the way. It was just really heavy. Should have had Brian carry that one. So, the opportunities that we have right now, we are providing lots of consistent and frequent volunteer opportunities for you all if you'd like to participate, and many of you do. Our first is Project Humanities. Every Friday, we are working to sort donations at Project Humanities at their facility in Tempe. And that is gathering all of their donations, sizing them, and getting ready for our distributions on the first and third Saturday of every month. Doesn't matter if it's Christmas, doesn't matter if it's New Year's Day. We're doing that on the first and third Saturday because consistency is important to people that need it. So the distribution is something that I really got started with and I really enjoy. It is an opportunity for us to provide clothes and toiletries to people that need it. Unhoused, students that are well below the poverty level, and no questions asked, no means testing, just we have this, we want you to have it. And one of the really one of the things that I really cherish about that is the process involves you meet someone at the door, you hold a bag for them, and you act as a personal shopper. You're taking somebody that frequently is not, or people don't think very highly of, unfortunately, and you're just getting to know them for 10 to 15 or 20 or 45 minutes, depending how well, how good of a conversationalist you are. And you're asking them, what do you need? What do we have? How do we join those together? So that is the first and third Saturday. It's on Meetup. Please sign up. We always need more volunteers. Last Wednesday, we had our Women for Women period packing party, which is putting together supplies or feminine products for people that need them. So you kind of see the theme there. It went so fast. We had, I think, 25 people attend. And is Michelle here? How many packages did we put together in about half an hour? 395. And those are distributed by Women for Women Tempe at no cost to people that need them. So we're going to be doing that probably every other month now. And if you look at Meetup, we're shooting for maybe the third Saturday afternoon of every month. Another thing that's very important to me is our little free library and pantry. Times have been hard, especially with SNAP benefits. We are filling up that pantry every single day, and it is drained, it is cleaned every single day. So we know that we are valuable to this immediate community, and we have people driving long distances actually to come here. And if we see them, we'll give them a bag of groceries and put them on their way. We're always trying to find new ways to help them, and we're always happy to receive any canned donations that you can make. It's all non-perishable that we put in our pantry. So anybody that wants to help, we also have a spot open on Tuesdays if you'd like to come in the morning and stock that so kids have snacks when they go to school. We'd love to have you talk to either Michelle Pope, Joy, or I, and we'll get you set up on that. You need to be a key holder too, by the way. And finally, this is a new program that Michelle and I put together on this is high concept, so you're going to have to stick with me here. Every fifth Saturday, every month that has a fifth Saturday, we're hosting an open house and skill sharing and information sharing. And so we just open up the center to anyone that wants to come. We've been working with the Arizona Resistance Front, is that right? And they've actually been helping us cater that. So we can get, people come in, they can see what we're about. We've had so many members here teaching. Roger and Marty were teaching crochet. Beth and Evelyn were teaching how to make paracord bracelets. We had Mars Delatour telling people how to properly use how to properly respect other people's pronouns as well. How to install Signal on your phone. More than that, too, we also had basic sewing and mending, which is really the definition of mutual aid. You're teaching someone to do something that helps them, that saves them money, that they can use that shirt for just a little bit longer so they don't have to spend another $20. So this is kind of a call for participation. If any of you have any skills, it doesn't have to be super practical, but it would be nice. If you would like to attend for that fifth Saturday, we'd love to have you. Contact Michelle Pope, J, or myself. You can also send an email to volunteer@hsgp.org, and we'll both get it, and one of us will handle it. But yes, so anyway, I just wanted to say if I didn't find this place, I would be just doom scrolling and getting angrier and angrier every day. I'm still doing that. But I also have some outlet for some positivity in the world, and I really appreciate everybody here. That was way more than a minute.
So thank you, Scott, for exhausting all of your humanist minutes for the rest of the year. Mike, come on up here. We're gonna follow that up with Mike Shelton, our secretary.
A week ago today, this room was occupied by the American Red Cross with blood donors giving blood in turn, and there were 24 of them. I was one of them. And as I was waiting here giving the blood, I thought, this really is an act of humanism. And I went over and I looked at the 10 commitments, and I decided, gosh, we fit in as blood donors. We have empathy. We are providing service and participation, but altruism is probably the one commitment that was most visible here. People who were waiting their turn to give blood to someone they don't even know, to help someone recover from some sickness. So I urge you to think about doing that as another contribution. We do it here every quarter on the Sundays when we don't have Sunday speakers. So think about that. If you can't do it yourself, try to persuade a friend. It's a great way to use this community center. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, some clearing house stuff, some house rules. If you wouldn't mind, if you have a cell phone or mobile device, could you please silence that for us so that we can give all of our attention and respect to our upcoming speaker. I will be coming around with the microphone towards the end for any questions that you may have. And at this point, I'm going to invite Aaron up to introduce our speaker.
Good morning. How is everybody doing? Okay, I'm very excited this morning to introduce to you Dr. Brian Dille. Dr. Brian Dille grew up in Southeastern Idaho, where he tired of the constant snow and wind. After attending college at Brigham Young University in Utah, he attended graduate school at Arizona State University. There he received a Ph.D. in political science, emphasizing foreign policy and decision-making. He has taught at Mesa Community College since 1999 and also teaches graduate courses in political psychology for ASU. In addition to teaching courses in world politics and American government, he directs the Model United Nations program. He published a textbook, Engaging the United Nations, designed to be used by high school and community college students. He also published Arizona Voices, a digital textbook designed to supplement U.S. history and government high school courses with Arizona-specific content that meets the state social sciences standards. He co-directs the Arizona Civic Education Project, which offers free teaching materials to Arizona educators. While brought to Arizona by his wife, Brian has developed a love for the state's beauties and people. He is happy that his 4 children are 5th-generation Arizona natives. Would you please join me in a wonderful, warm, humanist welcome to Dr. Brian Dille.
Thanks. Want to make sure you can hear me all fine? I'm not used to these ear things. I feel like I'm supposed to like break into a chorus of like Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat or something. So be happy I'm not. Well, I appreciate the invitation to come speak. I am a fan of the Humanist Society, even though I'm not a member. I've peripherally watched the work that you do, and I think it's important, the work that you do. In political science, we refer to civil society as a bedrock of our democracy, and a civil society can be churches, it can be the Oprah Winfrey Book Club, right? It can be the Boy Scouts. Like, there's all sorts of things that count as civil society, and the Humanist Society is one of them. And what I've just seen is an example of that in action as you are cultivating altruism and engaging in service in your community and meeting the needs that are really there. So I'm a big fan. And as far as the humanism, broadly speaking, my only interaction with that is I'm a big listener of The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, is my science podcast. How many, raise your hands, listen to The Skeptic's Guide? Right, highly recommend. Long-time listener. And so of those of you that raise your hand, do any of you know about the monkeys versus birds controversy. There we go. We got one hand in the back. So that's someone who's listened to it for a long time, as the monkeys versus birds. So to prepare to talk about to you, I looked at the topics of interest that Aaron showed to me. And what I see of these topics of interest is that all of these are under threat today. We can't take any one of these things for granted in our current environment. And as I look at the values, it's the same thing, the 10 Commitments. They're all challenged, threatened in some way by our society today, which is why it's so important that you meet together to directly work on these things. Now, I know that this is a 501c3 organization, and I want to be respectful for that. I was not asked to come speak to the No Kings protest organizers, right? And so I'm going to be careful and try to be nonpartisan as much as I can. The Democrats in the audience will probably, in my comments, will be like, "Amen, welcome to the resistance, brother." But my question that I wanted to ask myself is, well, what about the Republicans in the audience? How are these comments useful to them, if there's any left, I guess? What I can say is that you can agree with the goals of the current administration while still being deeply concerned about the mechanisms by which those goals are being pursued. You can believe that immigration is a problem and that we need to find solutions to it, but then wonder, maybe perhaps there's a way we can address that without completely violating the Constitution, or pouring tens of billions of dollars into an agency that is highly armed, undertrained, and unaccountable. Right? That is, if you are an actual conservative, that should be deeply troubling. That there's a federal agency that is unaccountable, because that's used to be a core tenet of conservatism. You can believe that DEI is a scourge of postmodern America, but wonder if perhaps, maybe, there's a way we can address that without completely destroying the universities in our country, and destroying the basic science research that used to take place there, but is being undermined and removed. You can believe that socialism is a threat, but wonder if perhaps, maybe, there's a way we can address that does not involve the federal government taking over corporations, colleges, state and local governments, and nonprofit organizations, which really is just a strong-arm version of socialism. So whether you're opposed to or in favor of the overall goals of this administration, you have to be asking yourself, is it right for me to just sit by and watch all of this happen? Or is there some way that I can influence or directly oppose what is going on? And so that's what I want to talk to you today, is as citizens. So my day job, I teach political science at Mesa Community College, and a big part of my job is cultivating citizenship and civic engagement. Like, I don't care what the policy objectives of my students are, but what I do care about is that they understand how to use our system of democratic governance to promote those goals, and that they can be effective, actively engaged citizens and not spectators. Because the closer we move to a spectator democracy, the more easily it is for an autocrat to seize control of that society. So we need to have active, engaged citizens, no matter what your political views are, because that's what protects us from tyranny, ultimately. So, what can I do? Lasting change. Sorry, I thought I had another page between this and that. So, the first 4 or 5 months of this year was just sort of an unending stream of chaos, of this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And much of America was, as Scott said, doom scrolling. And And a lot of people, colleagues, friends, relatives, they were asking me, what can I do? What can I do? And this is a fair question to ask of someone who's taught political science for 25 years, right? If I don't have an answer to this, what good have I done? And I'd say the taxpayers of Maricopa County probably should get a refund on, paying for my career. So there is an answer. What can I do? And so I want to look at this. What can I do? And I'm breaking this question down into the 4 component parts. What can I do? All right, so let's turn to the first part. What can I do? Now, lasting change and the preservation of democratic norms will not come from defeating the other side, but by persuading them to join us in efforts to actually do things that will help our community prosper and ensure fairness for all. Sure, there's always going to be partisan zealots on the other side that remain beyond reason or persuasion. But this oppositional core is fairly small in number. Most of the persuadable voters are independents, moderates, people who, while they're currently cowed into silence, they're deeply troubled and embarrassed by what is happening to our great country. And so what we want to do then is reach out to those people. By doing that, by finding common values. An example of this comes from a friend of ours who told us of her 74-year-old father, a man who voted for Trump in all 3 of the past elections, but is now on the streets protesting against the regime. Right? So, what happened? Like, why did that happen? It happened. The final straw was the administration's refusal to follow even a hint of due process while deporting immigrants here who are legally holding green cards, as well as Trump's statements that he intends to deport bothersome citizens as well in the future. We should welcome such grandfathers to the protest lines and encourage more. And so if we confront voters, right, if we can confront Trump voters with an accusation that they are personally responsible for the worst excesses, human psychology tells us that their reaction is to dig in and justify their earlier decision. If, however, we offer a face-saving way out of the MAGAverse, if we don't serve up a heaping plate of crow and demand that they eat it before we'll talk to them, then those independents and moderates who are necessary to build a movement with impact might get the courage to come over. So how do we do this? We do this by appealing to shared values. Instead of focusing on what we disagree on, we focus on what we agree on. An example of this is in the Arizona We Want survey from the Center for the Future of Arizona. This is a great organization that the Center for the Future of Arizona has been doing this for a long time. Every 10 years they do a survey. And so 2000, 2010, 2020. And it's a broad, generally applicable survey. And what they found is that there are large majorities of people who support robust public education, affordable health care, and good paying jobs, along with 4 other key values. And the support for these things was across party lines. Republican and Democrat, they all, like 85% of Arizonans, supported these 7 shared goals. And that was true across party. It was true across race and ethnicity. It was true across income category and urban and rural status. All the things that supposedly divide us disappear when we talk about core values. And we can disagree on how to secure those values, but a conversation focused on those values is much more likely to build a useful relationship than a shouting match over whose idea is better for how to get those values done. Now, the purveyors of disorder know that nobody crosses over to work to the other side when emotions are high and the volume is loud. And there's a reason anytime things look like they might be settling down, they say something outrageous to stir the anger back up. Because as long as people are emotional, they're not going to be willing to have that conversation about shared values. So don't be drawn into playing the game that they have designed. Instead, focus on building a prosperous, fair society that secures those values rather than the controversy of the day. Build bridges instead of scoring debate points. And now, this behavior is not surrendering your values. It's a strategy for widening the appeal of your message. And I found my other page. Turns out I printed this on both sides. That's why I was missing a page. I had to turn it over, right? It actually was there the whole time. And so let me read the paragraph that threw me for a loop that I really wanted to say, which is that in this time of problems, it's easy to be focused on opposition, especially when there's so much cruelty, chaos, and corruption occurring. It's appropriate to feel sadness and anger when our core values are being threatened. And the people in power are talking openly about destroying the current government, business, educational, and scientific pillars of the United States. It's appropriate to be upset about that. If you're paying attention, you ought to be upset about that. But we can't spend all of our energy in opposition. Not only is it exhausting, it's counterproductive because it prevents you from getting that discussion of shared values that I was talking about. The goal can't be just to win the next election or court case or to force into being a different version of change through a new set of executive orders and imperial actions. Because this attitude of just destroying the enemy, shaming the opposition, seizing victory where possible is how we got where we are today. A polarized society that is increasingly disengaged and growing doubtful about the efficacy of the democratic process. If we've learned anything in the past decade, it's that just being anti-something does not mobilize people. A successful movement must be for something. So that's something I really wanted to say, and I was upset that I couldn't find that piece of paper. All right, I got both sides of that paper done. That's good. All right, so building on persuasion, not accusation then. I want to give an example of this. Yesterday I was talking to my nephew. My nephew, as I said in the intro, I grew up in Idaho. My nephew is still in Idaho and feels like he's a tiny dot of light in a sea of darkness because he lives in Idaho. And he, and I know sometimes you feel that way in Mesa too, but it's even worse in Idaho. But he was wondering how do we have this conversation, particularly with his relative, my niece, his sister-in-law, who he can't even talk to. Right? It's a wedge in my family. How do you have that conversation? And so, my advice to him, and I'm sharing with you, that I said yesterday along these lines is, don't debate. Right? Don't point by point go through, the crazy that just came out of their mouth. Right? Don't refute it. Instead, you get curious. You get very curious. That's interesting. Why do you think that? And then when they answer that, you say, oh, okay, well, why do you think that? And then when they say that, you say, okay, and why do you think that? And what I found is it usually only takes about 3 questions before they realize they have no idea what they're actually talking about. And this is why in my own neighborhood, people don't talk to me because they know I'm going to get very curious, right? But there's another alternative. Like that in itself is good because you can't change anybody's mind. They can change their own mind, and that only happens once they realize, oh, maybe I actually have no idea what I'm talking about. Right? They have to realize that themselves. You can't point it out to them because, again, psychology kicks in if you try to point it out to them. The other alternative, and maybe it's not that, oh, I don't know, you might actually, at question 3, land on a core value, that's what they believe. And the odds are pretty high that you're going to share that core value with them. And so you talk about that. Oh, I agree with that, right? This is good. And after you talk a little bit about why that core value is important, you then ask, what, in a perfect world, how might we secure this core value? What would you do if you were in charge? And this core value, how would you promote it? And then just listen to them. And then what we almost always you're able to do is say, okay, that's great. I just want you to realize what we're doing now is not that, right? And then you start pointing out the disconnect between the strategies being used and what their ideal strategy might be. Because many of them are unaware of the vast gulf between what they think is happening and what actually is happening. And at that point, you're having a conversation, not an argument. So persuasion, not accusation. Get deeply curious. So that's the what. What can I do on this? The strategy is widening the appeal of your message, not winning a debate. Okay. Oh, here's the shared values that the Center for Future for Arizona. Again, these values here, 85% of Arizonans believe in that. And if you look, one of the reason civic engagement and leadership, the reason leadership is there is because, again, 85% of Arizonans across party line, urban, rural, race, do not believe that our current state leadership is capable of securing these values, right? Even the Republicans are despairing over the Republican leadership that we have, ability to do these things. And so they feel that we need better leaders. That's a shared value. We need better leaders, no matter what party you are. People believe that. And so if we appeal to these shared values, that's going to lead to an interesting and useful conversation, as opposed to an argument. And this is a much more interesting conversation at Thanksgiving than the latest topic of the day. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. What can I do? So that's the what. So now what can I do? Political science has a term called efficacy, which is a measure of how much impact a person believes they can have on their community. And history shows that when authoritarians rise to power, they work to divide their society into smaller and smaller groups that have to compete with each other. And the purpose of their propaganda is to make people feel isolated, powerless, and afraid, to directly address this sense of efficacy, that I can actually do something. Authoritarians target efficacy to ensure a compliant populace. So the belief that nothing can be done about a situation is simply not true in America. Our history shows that over and over and over again, normal people working together have demanded change from government and got it. Power still resides in the people if they use it. It's important to have in your social media feed to avoid a bubble. You need to subscribe to at least 10% of your feed should be things you don't agree with, because otherwise your algorithm is only going to feed you stuff you already believe, and you're in a bubble. So go out of your way, connect with people. Maybe not the crazy people. Try to find good people who make arguments you disagree with, right? And go follow them so that your algorithm feeds you some stuff that is challenging to yourself. That's how you stay out of the bubble. So I do that, and so I get Facebook messages sometimes, and all I can do is like give a deep sigh, right, as I move on to the next thing. But one of them was a guy who said, like, the only people who are complaining about what's going on right now are people who don't want to take America back and restore it to the people. And I normally just ignore these things, right? Because you don't want to engage, especially on Facebook. That's a complete waste of time. But I just couldn't take it anymore. So I replied and said, I'm just really exhausted from this sense of victimhood and grievance, right? How many years have people been saying this, right? Aren't you tired of the sense of victimhood and grievance? And I just left it at that. And they didn't reply because They're not tired of the sense of victimhood and grievance. It's not true, right? We don't have to take the country back. We are the country. The country is us, right? When we change, the country changes. And if you want the country to change, you need to change the people, because we are the country. I think back, like when I'm teaching, I always have to ask the first day of class, what is your earliest political memory? And it's like, for me, I was a little kid, and I was doing the whole, not going to bed thing. I need a glass of water. There's like a strategy when you're a little kid, right? So I was doing that, and my parents, instead of shooing me away, they said, "Come in, sit down. You need to watch this." And I thought, cool. Like I'm like 4 or 5. I'm like, cool. I get to see something. I get not go to bed. So I'm sitting down. I'm watching TV with my parents, and there's a guy in a suit crying. And I'm like, I had no idea what it was. And then when it was done, they kicked me off to bed again. And it turns out I was watching Richard Nixon resign from the presidency, right? And so that's my first memory of anything overtly political. So that's the story that I tell, because I'm old. I'm not as old as maybe some in the room, but I'm old enough to have been alive when Richard Nixon was resigning. And so I ask that question to my students because that tells me what stories I can tell. And I don't do it as often anymore because it makes me feel bad. That their earliest political memory is Joe Biden becoming president, right? And they know nothing prior to that, and so it's hard. But to go back into history then, because the people in this room at least remember that, we can go back to like 9/11. And if you remember, after the towers collapsed, there was a movement of the government basically was going to pretend that never happened, right? It was terrible. Let's just go invade Afghanistan and not worry about what actually happened. And that's where it was going to be. That's what all the institutions of government had sort of accepted that answer of, gee, that was too bad, let's move on. Right? And the mothers and wives, the widows and mothers of the people who died in those towers said no. And they refused to accept the answer that we were just going to say, oh well, and move on, which is what the government was going to do. And they mobilized, and they insisted that there be an actual accounting to what happened. And it's hard in America to deny widows and mothers, right? Because there's a moral and spiritual authority that is present in an aggrieved woman, right? That our society recognizes in times of crisis. And so they mobilized that. And what happened was the 9/11 Commission, which you may have heard about, right? Where they went through and they listed all of the mistakes and all of the failings of federal, state, and local government that all put together led to that disaster. And they published a book. I've got it on my shelf, right, of the 9/11 Commission, right? None of that would have happened if not for a handful of citizens who said, no, this is not acceptable. We are going to demand change. And that's just one example of our history. Over and over and over again, normal, everyday Americans take action. And that is how change happens. Our government, we do live in a democracy. Our government is responsive. All of the noise that you're hearing is an intentional effort to make sure you forget that and feel hopeless. Because if you feel hopeless, you are not going to take action. Right? So that's the can. Power does still reside in the people if you use it. You don't have anyone convince you otherwise. So there's two currencies of power in America. The lasting change, the preservation of democratic norms will not come by defeating the other side, but by persuading them to join. Nope, I flipped the paper the wrong direction. I'm just going to put that over here. Okay, so there's two currencies of power in America, money and votes. You have to have both to succeed. The 2025 Wisconsin Supreme Court contrast illustrates this fairly persuasively. Elon Musk dumped $20 million into a judicial race in Wisconsin to try to alter the impact of that election. The opposition, he just assumed you could buy an election because that's what people say. Like, oh, money speaks, democracy is irrelevant, all that matters is money. Well, the people with money believe that, right? And so he dumped $20 million into it. The opposition mobilized voters and ultimately won by over 10 points, right? And so money is extremely important, don't get me wrong, because if you don't have money, you don't have a voice, because you have to have money to buy access to ears. And so you have to have both. But it's not just money. Again and again, the record shows that money alone doesn't determine the outcome of a policy contest. People showing up and voting decides the outcome of the policy contest. So there is power when everyday Americans come together. Eric Liu, who is a guy I worked with years and years ago, and he's a big democracy promotion guy. He runs this Citizen University. He says, and I'll just quote it at length, "A president is not the government. The government is not the country. We are the country. We, the people, and our countless institutions and associations and patterns of interaction. To continue to claim the places where we live in all their diversity and pluralistic messiness is to reject a single strongman solution to all our challenges. It is to give our democratic experiment a chance to keep on evolving." Right, so this is who we are. You are not powerless. Don't let anyone convince you that you are. You have agency to decide your own actions. Don't give that agency away to any public figure. You need not be isolated. Find others who share your values and concerns, as we saw at the introduction here, right? Why, Scott, why did you get involved? Because after the election, you're like, oof, some bad stuff's about to happen, right? And so you joined an organization to do something about it, right? And I'm guessing you feel better about that decision, except when you're winded from hauling large boxes. So find others who share your values and concerns, perhaps a place like the Humanist Society here. Working together, we can affect change. And that's the only way lasting change has ever happened in America, is with people working together. All right, so let's go to the next one. So what can I do? What's my role in all this? One reason it's so difficult to know what to do is the sheer volume of issues, crises, and unprecedented changes that are happening. It's overwhelming. Note that every image of overwhelmed, like I was looking for a slide here, I was looking for overwhelmed, and every single image of being overwhelmed had someone holding their temples, right? And because it hurts, right, to be that overwhelmed. This is by design. Steve Bannon famously said that the strategy for the second administration was to flood the zone, right? Flood the zone. And that's what we're living through, is a very flooded zone. So what does that mean, to flood the zone? It's a basketball analogy, where an opponent is doing a zone defense. What you do, so if there's a zone defense here, here's a 3 up, 2 back zone defense. When this is what the opponent's doing, what you can do is move all of your players to one side of the court. Like maybe you're all pressing here on number 1 there, 1 and 3. And when you flood the zone, the defensive players will move over to, particularly if they're not well trained, right? They'll move over to where the ball is and all the other team is, so that they can have a great defense of that. And when this strategy works, when the defensive team moves all their players over to where the zone's being flooded, it leaves a lone offensive player there at number 5 who's not being guarded, who you can throw the ball to, and they can score an easy 3-point shot. So flooding the zone is a strategy for overwhelming a defense so that you can get away with stuff, because you can't pay attention to everything. So applied to policy, flooding the system with lots of policy changes in many different domains opposition to any one of those policies becomes diluted and ineffective. Right? So are we still talking about the Epstein files? Right? In a normal news cycle, we would be still talking about it. And we're not, because like 8 other things have happened like in the last week. Like, it's been a rough week. That's by design. Right? And when the opposition becomes diluted and ineffective, important actions are missed, or they don't receive the scrutiny they might in a normal media environment. There's lots of things going on that we're not noticing that in a normal administration would be big, big news. But because they're not as big as this crazy thing going on, right, it doesn't get any attention. The public feels overwhelmed, discouraged, and full of angst. In that flood of information, when people are doom scrolling, people are tempted to withdraw into apathy or resignation. Have you ever felt this way over the past year? All right. So to continue the basketball analogy, if an offense is flooding the zone, the response is to switch to a one-on-one defense. This enables the defense to meet the threat on the one side of the court without leaving anyone unguarded on the other side. No matter where the offense is, the defense has someone there to oppose it. So, applied to the current situation, a one-on-one strategy means that no one person has to oppose every single measure that is being put forward by the administration. It's impossible for any one person to do that. And it's actually really hard and one person to even keep track of all of this stuff that's going on. Remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's by design. So instead of worrying about and trying to oppose everything, pick 1 or 2 issues that are highly important to you. And the menu's going to be whatever, depending on your own values. Right? Pick 1 or 2 issues that is highly important to you. Follow that issue closely. Donate to causes that work on that issue. Engage in meaningful action on that issue at the local level. There's millions of people in this country who oppose what's going on and are worried about the chaos that we're seeing. If we each pick 1 or 2 issues, then this one-on-one defense will have more than enough people working together to effectively address any given issue. You can still pay attention to everything else, but focusing on one thing that you can actually make a difference with will help your mental state and enable you to have a long-term attention span that's necessary to enact change. So, while Jen and I are very concerned about all the stuff that's going on, we've picked a couple of issues. So for me, my 2 issues are refugee issues and LGBT issues. Right, so I did a sabbatical this past semester where I focused entirely on refugee narratives and how we talk about refugees impacts public opinion on whether or not we should support those refugees, and strategies on how maybe we can change that narrative, because if the people can support it, then the politicians will have to begin to support it. And then with LGBT issues, we volunteer with a variety of organizations. Jen does a lot more of that than I do. She's on the board of a couple of organizations that form youth conferences for LGBT youth so that they can find hope and companionship and solidarity. And so there's lots of things we could do, but by picking a couple of issues, we can actually do things on those issues. And again, that's good for you mentally to actually do something. Okay, so pick 1 or 2 issues. All right, so now the last one. What can I do? What actions can I take? People can feel powerless when they focus on national debates about national issues. There's a lot of smoke at the national level. While things happening at the national level are important, most of the government that affects your life is at the state and local level. So it's important to stay informed and follow these national debates, but there's very little that any individual person can do to impact those national debates. Like, here's where the Thanksgiving dinner goes awry, right? Because people get very emotional and very engaged in these esoteric national debates that nobody at the table can actually do anything about other than have strong opinions about it, right? What a complete waste of time, right? So going back to Eric Liu, when we let everything get nationalized, we feed the magnetic pole of a strongman. Decentralization decentralization of politics feeds freedom. So this picture I had is a hearing in the Arizona State Legislature, right? Any citizen can go speak at a hearing. You can do it digitally. You can lodge your written comments. You can do it virtually with Zoom, or you can go there in person and talk. But you have the right and ability to actually be there and give your input on that thought. And that's something that can actually make a difference. All right, so how do we, once you've narrowed your focus to a single issue, how can you effectively work on that issue and maximize your impact? So I'm going to give you a four-pronged approach, and then I'll stop talking. First, work to prevent mimicry of harmful federal policy by state and local governments. So if local governments imitate the policies of the strongman, those policies are legitimized. Bad policy must be isolated and resisted, not praised and emulated. So help politicians at the local level who oppose those policies, help them succeed. Local politicians are much more accountable to the people than federal office holders. So they live and work in the communities affected by their actions. So, and they have fewer constituents. And so local elections can be swayed by a dedicated group of engaged citizens who work together. As with all politics, you'll be much more effective working with a group than working alone. So this is why when I said find your issue, go find people who also work on that issue and work with them. Because you working by yourself isn't going to do much. Like I tell my students, you can do anything, but you can't do it alone. Right? Groups are how politics work in America. So one person can be dismissed as a crank. Have any of you felt that? Have you felt that you've been dismissed as a crank before? Right? It's not a good feeling. But when 10 people show up at a city council meeting and they're all wearing the same T-shirt, the person who stands up and speaks for that group wearing the T-shirt will be listened to by the city council because there's a group there. You can't be dismissed as a crank if you're working as a group. Call and write letters to your state and local representatives. Organizations like Five Calls make this easy. If you don't know what that is, just go on your app phone and just look up Five Calls. You type in your address, and it will tell you the contact information for all of your elected representatives, federal, state, and local, and how to contact them as well. It makes it easy. Have the group that you're working on swamp their offices with calls. Attend and testify at legislative hearings, city council meetings, school board meetings. And when you contact these officials, don't gripe about national politicians or national debates. Right? Instead, politely tell them what you expect them to vote on in a certain way on a specific measure that's before them. That's going to be far more effective than you just talking about how terrible the politician you don't like is. Now, this might sound like just more talk, but after the GOP town halls were flooded with complaints about DOJ, there was a notable shift in how many Republican members of the House were willing to speak out against Musk and his chainsaw. Showing up matters. All right. Second, work to mitigate the impact of harmful policies in your community. This is why I loved when Scott, you said, the reason you came here was because you could see harmful policies were going to have harm, so you took action to mitigate that harm, which is what your food pantry here is doing. It's not changing the policy, but you're mitigating the harm. Volunteer with nonprofit organizations working on the issue you're focusing on. Talk to people affected. Listen to their stories. So now you're not talking to your own bubble, you're talking to the actual people who are being hurt by these policies. Sometimes just being heard can help someone in crisis. There are things, these are kinds of things that are best done in your own community, with those you share a physical space with, which is why this local action is what I'm talking about. Making a real impact in the lives of your neighbors will erase your sense of powerlessness. All right, third, make your voice heard. One condition that is supporting the rise of authoritarianism is our division into separate media ecosystems. People on one side only hear about facts and opinions that support their pre-existing beliefs. This means a lot of people are actually unaware of any negative consequences to the policies that they support, because their algorithm's not telling them the consequences of what they support. And so they think only all sane thinking people would agree with me, right? Well, it's because you're not aware of the consequences of these policies. So public actions, like a protest, can punch through media bubbles because they're physical. They cannot be mediated by elites or made invisible by an algorithm, because you're standing in front of them. A normal person is standing in front of them. And they're like, oh, normal people disagree. And some of them might think, I wonder why. Public actions can take many forms. Thousands of people can gather to march in a protest. Yesterday there was a pop-up protest at the corner of Stapley and Southern. Did any of you see that? There was like an anti-ICE protest. And so my daughter was visiting from out of town. And she's like, can we please go. So Jed and I took my daughter and we went and spent just like a half hour, because I forgot a hat. And so I can't stay outside too long. So, but we showed up, right? And there were 100 or so people. And cars would drive by and honk if they supported, and make, various hand gestures if they did not support. But it was a visible presence, right? That here in Mesa, there's people who are upset at this unaccountable government agency. So hundreds of people can gather on sidewalks, which is what we did in the busy intersection, carrying signs and waving to drivers, having a respectful conversation with a friend with different views in a park. That's a form of action. All of these are examples of public action, where people who are apathetic or indifferent to bad policy see visually that there are regular people with legitimate concerns that should be considered. So, having said that, then, let me give a quick note about protests. Protests can be a powerful tool for change, but they can also be irrelevant or self-defeating. It's important to understand the limits of protest. And this is a thing I have to tell my students a lot, because they've grown up thinking political action equals protest. Right? They don't really understand that there's a lot of ways you can take action, and they think a protest is the way you lodge your complaint. That's not the case. A protest will never convince an opposition group to change its mind. It just won't. If that's your goal, it's futile effort. Right? You are not going to persuade anyone to change their mind with a protest. However, when effective, a protest can change the political reality of an issue by tilting the public balance in your favor. So you're not trying to convince an opposition group that you're right and they're wrong. You're trying to convince the independents and moderates who aren't really sure what's going on that maybe they should reconsider their thing. And the balance of public opinion shifts, then policy shifts because of that. So the purpose of a protest is to call attention to your cause. So this has to be done in a way that persuades the majority to support you. So the most effective protests in our history appeal to shared ideals and then highlight the gap between the reality and that shared ideals. And when you do that, the majority of America gets persuaded. Like, oh, I didn't realize there was this big gap. Simply yelling, insulting the majority, or engaging in violence and vandalism will certainly call attention to your cause. Here we got the anti-ICE protesters standing on top of a burning Waymo in Los Angeles. And it might help you feel better after a cathartic release, but it will hurt your cause if the majority concludes that you and your cause are a bunch of crazies. So effective protest is a call to action made in a persuasive way, which is why the Portland protests were so effective because it undermined the narrative that this was a dangerous situation that justified violence. The people in Los Angeles upheld that narrative and furthered that narrative. The people in Portland undermined that narrative and made it impossible for the administration to continue to use that narrative. That's an effective protest. All right, fourth and finally, the national fights are not irrelevant. So in addition to focusing your efforts locally, also give financial support to national groups that are engaged in, particularly those that are engaged in legal challenges. That's an expensive posture, and so that you need to have resources to do that. And national groups can mobilize those resources in ways that local groups simply can't. Political lobbying, mass mobilization, these are things national groups can do and should get some of your support. This is what effective action looks like in at the national level. Okay, so I'll skip through this. This is, I already mentioned the refugee policy these are examples of how to do those four things specific to refugee policy. All right, so in conclusion, what can you do? Lots. It's okay to take a little rest from time to time. Take a break from the unending stream of chaos and cruelty that passes for news these days. Sometimes a period of disengagement is needed to maintain one's mental health. Go outside, take your socks off, feel the grass, sit in a meadow, hike a trail, reconnect with nature and your own humanity. But don't stay there. Right? Come back. Engage. Because collectively we can replace chaos with order and cruelty with compassion. We are citizens. The nation is us. So let us be the ones who define what the nation is instead of elite media figures. We are the ones who create our community. By building bridges, using shared values, recognizing the power you have as a citizen, focusing on a single issue and taking action on it, and actively working on that issue at the state and local level, you can replace the sense of powerlessness and dread with fortitude and action. And these strategies work no matter what side you're on, and practicing them can heal our nation by restoring civil discourse as the default form of civic engagement. So you can do this. And thank you for your time. Good luck with it.
So it appears that we have about 25 minutes left for questions. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. I'll try to get to you as soon as I see your hand raised. And then I will come and visit you in the order that I receive them.
Thank you so much again for your great talk. It was absolutely fantastic. I'm curious about something related to this, which is, this is kind of tapping into your expertise in political science. How do you respond to maybe some folks who might say something like, I'm actually thinking about some family members I have, but some family or folks out there who might say, America is not a democracy. We were never set up to be a democracy. The founders hated democracy. We're supposed to be a republic.
Yeah, this is a favorite talking point on the right and has been for a long time, that we're not a democracy. And they get quite upset about it. In fact, there's a group called the Town Hall. Have you guys heard of the Arizona Town Hall? They've been around for like over 30 years, and they pick a different topic each year. And their topic 2 years ago was voting. And so the woman who runs that was in Kingman talking about voting and the importance of voting. And she mentioned that as a democracy, we rely on voting. And they literally ran her out of town. Like the sheriff had to escort her because they were worried about her safety, because they were so angry at her for suggesting that we're a democracy, right? And so what the talking points on the right, what they're trying to say is that we're a republic, not a democracy. The idea that every viewpoint shouldn't be heard because we're not a democracy, we're a republic. Right? And what they don't understand, because they did not go to my political science class, right, is that democracy is a broad term, and there are different kinds of democracies. And one of them is a direct democracy, which is what they're directly talking about. And the founders didn't like direct democracy. James Madison referred to the mob, right? We have direct democracy a bit here in Arizona, like the initiatives and the recall of judges. Those are all direct democracy things that we have because our Constitution came after the Progressive Era, 1914. And so we have some of that. Most states don't have those things. That's direct democracy. So that is a form of democracy. A republic is a form of democracy where you elect leaders and those representatives then make policy choices on your behalf. There is a third kind called corporatist democracy, where your interaction is through your group membership. So groups are identified, not individuals. And there's only been a few of those. Chile was for a little while. The example I like to give is the Mesa Community College Student Senate. Right? In the Mesa Community College Student Senate, the voting members are clubs. And so as a student, if you want a voice on the Senate, you go to your club, and then your club representative gets to speak and vote at the Senate. That is a form of democracy called corporatism, right? So a republic is a kind of democracy, and that's what they don't understand. They think the word democracy only means direct democracy. It doesn't. So, newsflash, we are a democracy, right? We are a republic, which is a kind of democracy. And yeah.
Thank you, Brian, for really an interesting, constructive talk. I was thinking about your statement that protests can be counterproductive when they become violent in relation to what's going on in Minneapolis right now. And thinking, well, but at least it's bringing attention to this. It's bringing focus that the rest of the public, like what we saw in Mesa, are reacting to what they saw in Minneapolis. So is there not some benefit to the fact that at least it brings national media, national attention to this problem in a very vivid way?
That's a great question, because violence does bring attention. That is for sure. And it does bring it up as a topic of conversation. But it fails in a couple of other regards. One is it is not persuasive. Right? That mass of public opinion is not going to shift if the response to the murder of that woman in Minneapolis is for progressives to take up arms and resist and fight. Right? If that happens, you're not going to persuade the public that maybe having a highly armed, poorly trained, unaccountable government agency is a bad idea. Right? Instead, what happens if you take up armed opposition is it feeds the narrative of these people are anti-American, they're crazy, they're threats, and it actually gives a legal pretense to do what the president has been talking about openly for months, which is to declare an insurrection and invoke the Insurrection Act, which legally gives the president the right to declare martial law. Right? So the result of, if we respond with violence to violence, it feeds the narrative of the authoritarian and makes it nearly impossible to non-violently solve the problem. So I'm deeply worried about what's going on, particularly the governor calling in the National Guard. I think it's a huge mistake because it creates a situation where you have armed representatives of the state standing across the street from armed representatives of the federal government. And that's not a good situation. And again, that gives the president actual, unlike all the illegal stuff he's done, that actually gives the president legal authority to declare martial law and impose the policy changes that up until now he hasn't been able to because of courts and public opinion. So a violent reaction will get attention, but it will in the end seriously hurt the cause. And I just hope the governor is very careful what he does with those dudes with machine guns, because it could hurt the entire country very, very badly if it goes wrong. Right. Oh, sorry. We got people with microphone. We'll come back.
I saw the Future of Arizona thing this week, and it indicated what voters wanted. And there are a couple of things for education. One of them I remember was that kids who are in high school can get college credit simultaneously.
Yeah.
Which is a good idea. But what I'm kind of trying to figure out is we have this underfunding of public schools, and we have unlimited funding for charter schools. So what am I missing in terms of how voters are seeing what Future Arizona says versus what I see in the media?
Well, you're not missing anything. What you've said is correct. It's very frustrating. I was talking to a Republican friend of mine a few years ago, and we were talking about education and education funding, and he was saying, well, I don't agree with my party on this issue. I'm in favor of public education. And I said, well, you say you're in favor of public education, but is there a single election that you have not voted for Andy Biggs? Right? So do you support education? I don't think you do, because the people you're voting for are actively undermining it. And you can say you support it, and you might in your heart support it, but your behavior is undermining it. And there's a disconnect between that, because on education in particular, the Republicans have run Arizona for 70 years. So there's no way to be bipartisan about this. It's a Republican policy that we're living under. And what those Republican leaders have done is consistently undermine education, and then 6-ish months before an election, they talk about critical race theory or trans people or creeping socialism or something to get their base fired up so that they don't actually have to have a policy conversation about education. And that has been a successful strategy for like 30 years. And so the only way around that is to find some way, again, go back to those common values, and actually have a real conversation about education with people. Because most people don't like where we're at with education, but they don't see the connection between their vote and what's happening. I wish there was an easier answer than that. Hey, Jen, I forgot my water bottle. Could you? Yeah, I can take the question, though.
Hi, my name's Jen as well. I'm in behavioral health, and as you were speaking, I was really struck by, like in the psychobabble land that I live in, there's what we call the triune model, where when I, as a therapist, am trying to help somebody go through trauma or make a decision that fits for their values, if I know they're in what's called their monkey brain, their emotional brain, I have to just hold space for them and validate those shared values. And then once that monkey brain settles down, then their logical, their prefrontal cortex can come online. And that's when we can have a civil debate. Mm-hmm. But if I rush it and I say, oh, that's wrong, this is a distorted belief, then the wall between us grows so much higher. So like when I'm working with parents who have children with acting out behaviors, we often say, connect before you correct. And that is such potent, it's so really interesting, because as you were talking, I'm like, holy shit, this is psychology, dude. And this is parenting. Yes. And this is being a good human and recognizing that, sometimes, this is my view, but sometimes good people can do bad things, but when they know better, they choose to do better. And I really hope that the vast majority of humans, once we can get to that shared values, that we can connect and go, oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, now I get it. This was a distorted belief. But separating the person from the problem, I'm not evil. This action was counter to my values. But by separating that, then it becomes less personal, and it can become debating the issues and not having to put your feet down into the sand and say, no, I'm going to plant my flag here and die on it,
Yeah. Well, couple of reactions to that. First of all, thank you for the work you do, because I can, not even knowing you, I can tell that you're overeducated and underpaid for what you're doing. So thank you for that service. It's so important to the individuals that you interact with. Excellent point that good citizenship is very close to good parenting. Right? Not that we want to be paternalistic about things, but we're talking about humans. We're talking about how to talk to people. In the Dille home, we refer to it as a lizard brain, not the monkey brain. And so we had a son who, when he's the most placid, wonderful human being as an adult, but as a toddler, he was a terror, right? And he was like, we called him bipolar boy until my father-in-law said, maybe you shouldn't say that out loud. He was just the happiest kid, and then he was like the most angry child. And he loved the singing, the wheels on the bus go round and round, right? And so when he was in his rage moments, we would say to our son Jackson, we'd say, who's riding the Jackson bus? Like, who's driving the Jackson bus? Right? To help him like stop and realize he was like out of control. And once he said, I guess Jackson's driving the Jackson bus, right? Then we could have a conversation, because it helped short circuit that, storm that was going on emotionally. And so that's an excellent point when we're talking with, the uncle over the Thanksgiving dinner, right? Same thing, right? If there's an emotional storm going on, the words coming out of your mouth are irrelevant. Right? They're going to have zero impact at all until you calm that down and have that connection. And so, thanks for that reminder. It is good psychology.
My turn?
Oh.
I noticed you graduated from BYU.
I did.
I did too.
Go Cougs. They had a great basketball game last night.
Most of my family belong to the Mormon Church, and I've been beating my head against a wall for about 10 years, arguing with them about politics and this administration going too far. Are there any strategies in the Mormon sphere specifically that you've found that have helped you break through in literally any way?
Sure, I can. The culturally specific audience there. That's applicable to other areas. The core of the question is, how do you talk to people who are so opposed, and particularly with religious people, their identity is wrapped up in their position. How do you get past that identity? Because people are going to protect that identity at all costs. The walls will go up no faster than if you threaten someone's core identity. And so the only way around that is to, like I said, have that connection, try to find the core values, because you probably share some core values with them with your upbringing. Go back to those core values and focus on that, and then try to build off of that, because again, you'll never change their mind. You'll never convince them of anything. The only hope is that they will convince themselves of things. And that just takes time. And the only way it's going to happen is by not directly challenging. And so one way I do that within the Mormon context is I tell people that I consider myself a Nauvoo Mormon. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And so I talk about the Latter-day Saint people in the mid-1800s were an oppressed minority who was deemed non-white by the overall community and was punished by society because they were non-white and because they were oppressed because of their minority views. And their response to that was one of universalism, right? That everybody should have the right to think what they think. And that's what that version of our faith community is still there if you scratch. Well, scratching doesn't do it. You got to take a snow shovel sometimes to get down to it, but it's there. And you appeal to that origin story, that shared value of origin story. And what modern Latter-day Saints project politically is far more a reflection of the Intermountain West culture that they're in than it is of their religious values, even though in their mind they're all the same thing. And so by talking about the Nauvoo period, you can disassociate the culture from their core value and make some progress that way.
Hi, I wanted to thank you for this really fantastic presentation. My question is a semi-historical one, but I have two old friends, and I'm really old, so they, only my mother used to say, "Oh, she's been a friend for 66 years." Well, now I have one, right? Two, both Republican, and up until the Trump era, we could have talks, and everybody left, and I'm still, because I love these two women so much, we haven't broken apart. And I try to use some of the principles you're talking about. But what I really am interested in is, how did the Republican Party get to this point? How did they get to the having a huge base that's probably feeling very ignored and not loved and not heard? How did that, historically, or just in the general early history, how did they get to that? Because it used to be states' rights,
Right.
versus federalism in my history classes. How did that get here?
Yeah, the answer to that is longer than we have time. So I'll try to give the short version, which is that this is part of a anti-establishment movement that, with the rise of populism, that is not just Republicans, it's Democrats as well. And if you look in the last 30 years, every institution of our society, the elites have screwed up, right, in some way. Banking, religion, politics, military, like every single core institution of our country has really screwed up in the last 30 years. And because of that, people have lost confidence in those institutions. And so what the populists have done is that creates a space for them to come in and say, I can tell you why it's wrong. Right? It's those people who seized control of those institutions. We need to retake our country back from those people. And those people varies depending on which populist you're talking to, but it's the same dynamic. And Republicans have fallen prey, I guess, to that. If you look at sort of hard left Democrats, they're doing the exact same thing. They just point to different thems that seized control of they're usually like wealthy capitalists, but it's the same dynamic, is someone else is to blame for hijacking this country. And only the populist hero, the guy on the white horse, is going to come in and save us and fix it all. That's what populists have been saying forever. And after the 90s, that message began to resonate across the country because of the failures of elites, legitimate failures of elites. So that's the short answer. I can give a more pithy answer, which is that back in the 90s, I remember Republicans were complaining during the Clinton administration about the jackbooted thugs of the government, right? They were going to come get us all. And that's why they were justifying the Second Amendment and states' rights. And there were no government agents that wore jackboots at the time. And so they were deeply concerned with these imaginary government oppressive, and now they are not concerned with actual thugs who are doing things. And the only difference is the imaginary ones wore jackboots, and the real ones wear mismatched army surplus. And so I've concluded that for these Republicans, it's all about fashion. That's the only answer I can come up with. It's a fashion sense, is why.
So we have time for one final question, and then we'll do a wrap up. And you have the final question.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have 2 points. One, could you give an example of an elitist screw-up? And two, if I can just mention that right now, I thought it went back farther in time to the desegregation of the schools. Just to take an example, Virginia said, if the public schools have to be desegregated, we'll close all the public schools. Thank you.
Sure. Could I ask what domain? Because they're all over the place. So which domain?
Oh,
would you like?
for the elitist question?
Yeah.
I pick your favorite.
Okay, well then I'll take the low-hanging fruit, and that would be financial, right? The financial crisis of 2008 was because while people didn't trust religious leaders anymore after the scandals of the 80s, and they didn't trust military leaders anymore after the 9/11 attacks and the unending wars in the Middle East. They still held on to the fact that rich people were better than us, right? And at least the rich people know what's going on, right? The country's going to be okay because they have a stake in a viable country because that's how they stay rich, right? And then after the financial crisis, we were like, well, even the rich people are total screw-ups, right? And that was sort of, for many people, that was the last Jenga thing. And their ideology collapsed, and they became easy targets for populists. But yeah, the 2008 would be probably the biggest example of elite failure.
Okay, I think that we've done a wonderful job of exploring an amazing topic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
As we wrap up, do you have any podcasts, websites, organizations that you recommend that we support, or our guests here would like to attend as well?
Sure. Let me take this example to practice what I preach and promote my one issue that I'm working on. If you've got some money burning a hole in your pocket and you want to do good, the Catholic Social Services is the premier refugee settlement organization in Arizona. And they, like the Lutheran Social Services and other, like the International Rescue Committee, which is a secular organization, they all operate under the leadership of the Catholic Social Services because they've been doing it the longest and have all the connections. And so they all work together. And so a donation to them is going to do a lot of good. The International Rescue Committee does a lot of good. Welcome to America is the only most of the refugees settle in Central Phoenix. And so if you're an East Valley person, there aren't a lot of groups that help refugees. Welcome to America is based in Tempe. And what they do is they, when a refugee shows up, they've got nothing but the clothes on their back. And then they get 6 months before they have to stand on their own feet, which is, none of my kids can do that in 6 months, right? And so how do they do that? Well, what they do is when they're given this empty apartment, Welcome to America helps furnish the apartment. So they provide furnishings. And it's the only really East Valley refugee thing that I've been able to find. So that would be the one organization I would point towards.
Fantastic. Thank you again. If you would, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation.